huge salary increase. We know that they want revenue sharing that I just don't see any way that they're going to get, because I don't think the owners believe the owners believe the league's health is in a position to give a revenue share like that, and you've never turned a profit, which is, let's be honest, that's the big one. That's the huge one. And somehow, some way, if you'd ever told me, well, Rhodes, if you had to pick a side, which side?
The deadline for the WNBA collective bargaining agreement between the Players Association and team ownership concluded at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time without any extension being granted. Management made a public commitment not to implement a lockout, though this gesture failed to prevent several athletes from suggesting potential strike action. The current terms under discussion include substantial wage increases for players. The union has requested revenue-sharing arrangements that appear unlikely to materialize, primarily because ownership questions whether the league's financial situation can support such commitments. A critical factor remains that the organization has never generated annual profits, which represents perhaps the most significant obstacle in these discussions.
Well, Rhodes, if you had to pick a side, which side would you pick? If you ever told me that, or if I had to give credit to owners of the NBA or the WNBA, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. But I've gotten to the point I'm firmly team owner at this point, because the players continue to look terrible. There were statements released last night. The WNBA, PA, the Players Union, they're crashing out. They're crashing.
The situation has evolved to a point where support appears to favor ownership over the player's position, largely due to how the athletes' representatives have conducted themselves throughout this process. Both parties issued public declarations following the deadline. The Players Association released a lengthy communication that drew considerable criticism for its tone and approach. Their message stated that at midnight, the 2020 collective bargaining agreement would reach its expiration date. The union expressed frustration that despite showing flexibility and willingness to find common ground, league management and franchises had not reciprocated with comparable earnestness or dedication.
Yeah, the Players Union, they're crashing out. They're crashing out, and they look less and less professional by the moment. Fans are recognizing this. There are things that I just, they cannot keep this from getting personal, and it's making them look worse and worse as this thing's going on. So this was released. This was their statement. Quote, you may be like, Rhodes, you got glasses on. Yeah, because they released this statement with this tiny ass.
The statement accused ownership of consistently devaluing what athletes bring to the sport, ignoring their grievances, and deliberately allowing time to elapse. The union's announcement referenced an inflatable rodent display positioned outside the basketball retail location, describing it as a traditional emblem of workforce demonstrations. This action aimed to highlight what they characterized as problematic conduct by the league and its franchises during talks. The statement claimed that by procrastinating and maintaining existing arrangements, management endangers players' financial stability and betrays supporter confidence and commitment, all to preserve outdated policies that should no longer exist in women's professional basketball. This approach reveals a fundamental issue. The dispute has transformed into something beyond mere business considerations, becoming a platform for broader social commentary.
Yeah, because they released this statement with this tiny ass writing on it. I don't think, no, that doesn't do anything for increasing image size like that. So, at midnight, the 2020 WNBA WNBPA collective bargaining agreement will expire. Despite demonstrating our willingness to compromise in order to get a deal done, the WNBA and its teams have failed to meet us at the table with the same spirit and seriousness.
This tendency has historically hindered the league's development, contributing to poor viewership numbers and minimal attendance, as many sports enthusiasts seek athletic competition without accompanying political messaging or social activism. While a small, dedicated core audience appreciates such advocacy, particularly those who supported the league before recent popularity surges, mainstream sports consumers typically prefer to avoid such narratives. The union's statement continued by emphasizing that athletes care deeply about their supporters and demonstrate that appreciation through their court performances. It characterized the league's strategies as damaging to current and future players while alienating the communities and individuals who consistently support the sport nationwide. The declaration insisted that this flawed strategy would prove ineffective, stating that players remain determined, fearless, and steadfast in pursuing what they deem necessary to achieve a groundbreaking new agreement.
Spirit and seriousness. Instead, they have remained committed to undervaluing player contributions, dismissing player concerns, and running out the clock. Today's display of an inflatable rat, a universal symbol of labor protest outside of the NBA store, calls attention to how the league and its teams have handled these negotiations. By delaying and clinging to the status quo, they are jeopardizing the livelihoods of players, the trust and investment of fans, all in.
According to the union, this new contract must incorporate a compensation structure connected to a substantial portion of revenues that exist solely because of player participation. It must also guarantee professional working environments and establish safeguards that respect veterans who established the league while positioning the next wave of talent for achievement. The statement concluded by declaring that fair compensation is not negotiable and that advancement is significantly delayed, urging management and franchises to rise to the occasion while asserting that players have already demonstrated commitment and will continue doing so. By contrast, the league's official response proved remarkably concise and businesslike. Their brief statement acknowledged that the existing collective bargaining agreement had expired and confirmed that discussions with the Players Association continue.
They are jeopardizing the livelihoods of players, the trust and investment of fans, all in the name of preserving regressive provisions that no longer belong in women's basketball. See, this is the problem. This is less about business for these people than it is a social statement at this point, which has always been the downfall of this league. It's always why the ratings have been trash and people didn't show up, because people are like, I just want sports. I don't want political narratives. None of that. I don't care about your social revolutions. I don't. Now, the original fan base,
recognizing that the league currently experiences a crucial period of extraordinary popularity and expansion, management emphasized the importance of capitalizing on this positive trajectory. Their primary objective involves reaching an agreement that substantially elevates player compensation, improves the overall athlete experience, and promotes sustainable growth for both current and future generations of players and fans. This measured, professional communication contained no extraneous rhetoric or social reform language. Public reaction has shifted noticeably throughout this process. Initially, many observers expressed support for increased player compensation.
I don't. Now, the original fan base, that little core, ugly fan base that we've all experienced after the Caitlin Clark boom, they care about that kind of shit. But actual sports fans don't. Not only do they not care, they don't want to hear about it. So, let's keep going here. Players care deeply about their fans, take pride in honoring that loyalty every time they take the court.
However, as negotiations progressed and statements were released, sentiment has moved decisively towards supporting ownership positions. The Players Association somehow managed to make athletes appear even less sympathetic than before, which many find remarkable. Comments from observers reflect this shift. Many describe the union's statement as excessive and unprofessional, with some noting that the communication style mirrors attitudes they perceive as abrasive and unrefined.
Honoring that loyalty every time they take the court. The league's tactics harm current and future players and marginalize the very people who show up for the game in communities across the country. This misguided approach will not work. In the face of the league and team's actions, players remain undeterred, unafraid, and unwavering in their commitment to doing what is necessary to secure a transformational new CBA. This agreement must include a salary system tied to a meaningful share of the revenue.
Others find the union's lengthy declaration unnecessarily dramatic, with one person humorously commenting they wouldn't read such an extensive statement. Multiple observers note that what began as a legitimate pursuit of equitable compensation has devolved into antagonistic behavior driven by the same justifications, suggesting the conflict has moved beyond financial considerations into a struggle for control that players cannot win. Some pessimistically predict these developments may result in no season, with one commenter expressing indifference about losing the upcoming season. Others criticize the comparison between professional basketball and physical labor, sarcastically suggesting that if playing is truly so burdensome, the entire league should cease operations since athletes earn sufficient income for survival.
We know we want a deal that gives the best players more money, enhances the player experience, and supports the long-term growth. The WNBA players, and by the way, the players are in the right to argue for this. The WNBA are basically being like, well, what the players want isn't sustainable. I think if the players could guarantee the league will continue to grow, I think the league would make the deal. But there's no guarantee of that because everybody in the league is smart enough to know we are one Caitlin Clark injury away from this league.
The situation appears to have alienated even more people who might otherwise support the players' cause. Some observers suggest that the wrong representatives are handling these negotiations, proposing that certain star players who better understand the necessary balance should lead discussions instead. There's a perspective that this confrontation is happening prematurely, approximately 2 years too early. The argument suggests that players should have waited until the new media rights agreement actually commenced and ownership began receiving that revenue.
Everybody in the league is smart enough to know we are one Caitlin Clark injury away from this league going back to pre-2024. Not 2023, but everything lower in 2024. Like, we all know this league is nowhere near as culturally relevant right now as it was in 2024. In the summer of 2025, did First Take talk about any women's basketball? They talked about any of these sports shows. They talked about the first Angel Reese vs. Caitlin Clark game. They talked about Caitlin Clark against Liberty. And that was it.
Only then could franchises assess the league's financial position and actual profitability after supporting the organization for nearly 3 decades. Without experiencing this profit firsthand, ownership can only work from projections, making them unwilling to commit extensive resources when outcomes remain uncertain. After years of investment without returns, it appears ownership has reached a decisive moment. Either the league becomes profitable or it shuts down. Ironically, waiting an additional 2 or 3 years might have resulted in better salary offers than currently available.
Talked about Caitlin Clark against Liberty. And that was it. That was it. No one talked about Paige's 44-point game. No one cared. And that is a problem. And the league knows it's a problem. But the players, and this is where the kind of lack of professionalism on the player side comes in. Like, they're like reposting stuff about striking. They basically said here, at midnight, it expires despite demonstrating our willingness to compromise in order to get the deal done. They've shown no willingness. From what we've seen, the players have said, this is what we want and we're not budging. And by the way,
however, the revenue sharing percentage the union seeks, particularly their demand for gross revenue sharing rather than net, seems unrealistic regardless of timing. This fundamental misunderstanding of business realities raises questions about the union's negotiating strategy and ultimate objectives. The Women's National Basketball Association recently issued statements regarding the collective bargaining agreement deadline. The league expressed its commitment to building upon recent momentum, emphasizing the desire for arrangements that provide athletes with increased compensation while enhancing their overall experience and supporting sustained organizational expansion.
Said, this is what we want and we're not budging. And by the way, that's fine. I mean this when I say this. Until a game is missed, the players need to use every bit of leverage they have to get as much money as they can. As long as they don't overplay their hand and the season doesn't happen. Even fuck it. Even if some of the games have to be played in alternate arenas because they're double booked, who cares? At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that a season happens. The players need to use every bit of leverage. Is a game of chicken?
The fundamental conflict centers on sustainability concerns. League officials argue that the demands being made cannot be maintained long-term. While athletes have legitimate grounds for their positions, there's an underlying reality that both parties understand. The organization remains heavily dependent on Caitlin Clark's presence and health. Should she suffer a significant injury, viewership and cultural relevance could quickly return to pre-2024 levels or potentially worse.
Every bit of leverage. Is a game of chicken that right now the owners are winning. Because, for lack of a better word, the PA, the owners aren't giving it to the players, and the players are saying dumb shit. So in the public eye, Not that like anyone's really going to be pro owner in this scenario because fuck them. At the end of the day, I'm pro basketball. It says here as well, the WNBA fails to meet us at the table.
The 2024 season represented a peak in attention and engagement. Throughout the following offseason and summer of 2025, mainstream sports media coverage dropped dramatically. Major sports discussion programs briefly covered opening games and select matchups involving Clark, but largely ignored other significant performances, including exceptional individual scoring achievements by other talented athletes. This stark reduction in media attention represents a significant concern for the league's financial stakeholders.
The WNBA fails to meet us at the table with the same spirit and seriousness. Instead, they've remained committed to undervaluing player contributions. Today's display of an inflatable rat, a universal symbol of labour protest outside the NBA store, calls attention to the league and its teams have handled these negotiations. And I've never... What? Genuinely, what? I typed it in. Rat, WNBA. There was no pictures of it. You would think people just going past the NBA store would be taking pictures of a big rat outside it. Because, again, the NBA store is what? Like...
The union membership has been vocal on social media platforms, sharing content about potential work stoppages. Their official statement indicated frustration with negotiation progress, claiming they demonstrated flexibility while the opposing side remained inflexible. However, external observers note that public statements from the athletes' representatives suggest firm positions with minimal room for adjustment. This approach represents a common negotiating tactic where parties maximize pressure before any actual games are affected.
And the NBA store is what? Like 3-minute walk from all those like Louis Vuitton. Is the Louis Vuitton building where it's just a bunch of like Louis Vuitton makeup bags and everyone takes pictures of that. If it's a big rat in the middle of Fifth Avenue, you would assume as much. But it says here, by delaying and clinging to the status quo, they're jeopardising the livelihoods of players and trust and investment of fans. Look, I'm going to be honest with the players.
Until scheduled contests are actually cancelled, athletes maintain every right to leverage their position for maximum financial gain. Even if logistical complications arise, such as alternative venue arrangements due to scheduling conflicts, the critical factor remains whether games occur as planned. The current standoff resembles a high-stakes strategic game where ownership currently holds stronger positioning, partly because public messaging from the athlete's side has occasionally appeared counterproductive. The union criticized the league for failing to engage with appropriate seriousness and accused management of systematically undervaluing athletic contributions.
To the players. Unless your name is Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, Aja Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, if this league shuts down and those 6 or 7 players that I've mentioned, if the league shuts down and every city that has a team, because yes, there are cities that have fans, every city that has a team starts a breakout league, and as a symbolic gesture, an inflatable representation commonly associated with labor disputes was displayed outside a prominent retail location. However, this demonstration received minimal public attention or social media coverage despite the high traffic area where it occurred. The statement warned that delays and resistance to change jeopardize both athletic careers and fan investment. However, there's a harsh economic reality at play.